So in this video we'll be looking at how to use a Casio calculator, going over the basic functions, some top tips and some uncommon features. Now, as several exam papers allow you to use a calculator, it is vital you understand and know how to use more of the mathematical and scientific features on your calculator. It will be easier and, more importantly, more accurate to use these features when calculating complex calculations. Now, before we move on to the actual buttons and what they represent on a typical scientific calculator, what we'll be going through is more the Casio calculators, because they tend to be more the most recommended and more popular calculator manufacturer in schools. Now, the first thing we need to do is make sure that your calculator is in the correct mode. Now, often when I'm teaching, a lot of students tend to think that their calculator is like a Game Boy, or that's actually showing my age, like a computer portable console or a mobile phone, and they just press random buttons or wanting to see what buttons do. Now, unfortunately, if you press certain buttons, they won't actually do anything unless you're using it correctly, which is what this video is going to show you. However, if you are one of those types of people that mess around and press just random buttons on your calculator when you're bored, you can mess up your calculator. Now, messing up your calculator is never going to be permanent unless you mess up the screen, i.e. start scratching it with a pen or with a compass, as I've seen some students do. You can sort of program your calculator into different modes, and that will stop the functionality of what your calculator is typically used for. So it's really important you know how to reset your calculator to when you have mistakenly put it in certain programs. Now, I would say the more common errors that tend to come up on calculators is when you have an fx equals come up, or if you have a true false come up. And also sometimes the fraction button comes up slightly weird as well, which again I'll go through in some cases. Now, this is one of the more older versions of the Casio calculator, which I'll show you how to do on the more newer ones, just so this video doesn't go out of date so quickly. So the first thing you want to do is look at this. Now, the first thing we want to do is make sure it's in the right mode, and how we do that, so I just load up this particular calculator up. So let's just say our calculator's in the wrong mode. What we want to do is press shift and then mode setup, and what you'll get is you'll get a list of these things here. Now, if your calculator, now as you can see, all I've done, if I just go through that step again, so shift mode setup, you can see it's got a list of 8 options, and if I scroll down, it's giving me a list of a few different options as well. Now, for this, what you want to make sure is you're using Math 10, which is option 1. So you won't many notice any particular difference on this, but if you just go shift mode and make sure it's in option 1, then that's absolutely fine. Now, the next thing you then want to do is, if you're working with angles, so in terms of trigonometry more often, then what you want to do is press shift mode and make sure you're in deg mode. So if you press option 3, and what you'll find is you'll have a little deg or a little D come up on your calculator, just to make sure that your calculator is using the right type of angles. Next thing you then want to do on this is also, now if you have got something that's slightly weird, i.e. the true false, then maybe what you want to do is select the norm option, so option 8, and when it gives you an option between 1 or 2, always select option 1, and that will then reset your calculator as well. Another resetting your calculator, if you just press mode setup, and you'll come up with 3 options here, is you want to select option 1, which is just comp, and that will fully restore your calculator into anything that you could potentially do with your calculator. So if your calculator is not really behaving and you've got one of the older Casio models, then again, just to go over, what you want to make sure that you're doing is you're in shift and then press mode setup, and then the options you want to make sure that you're picking is option 1 Math 10, which I think was MATH 10. You want to select 3, which is deg, and you want to select option 8, which is norm, and then select option 1. So if your calculator is one of the older versions and it's not really behaving properly, then all you then need to do is the following. Now, to add on to that, what you then also need to do is just press mode setup without the shift function, and then press option 1, and what you want, option 1, which is comp. So anything you may do to your calculator, if something's not behaving properly, whether the fraction button or you get an fx or true false, follow those steps and you'll be absolutely fine. Now, if you've got one of the newer calculators, which looks something like this. Now, this is the one that's recommended for GCSE and A level. but it's also one that's in its FX83 GT model as well. Now if you press shift mode, you won't get these options. Instead, if I press shift mode setup, it comes up with something that looks like this. Now for this, what you then want to do is press option 1, which is input output, and again you can see we've got the maths 1 or math 10 option, so you want to select option 1 and that'll be absolutely fine. If you go to shift mode setup again, you want to select angle unit, so select option 2, and again you want to select degree mode, so option 1, and that's going to be absolutely fine. And let's just double check to make sure nothing else I'm missing. No, I think that's pretty much it. Obviously some calculators will come up with more options than the other, it just depends on what model you've got. And also you can also adjust the contrast of your calculator as well, so if you select option 3, you can then make your calculator lighter, or you can make it darker depending on what you want. Now I can't do it on this emulator simply because it's kind of fixed. Now if I've got one of the older versions, again go shift mode setup, scroll down, it's giving me the contrast option 5, and then again I can just either make it lighter or darker depending on how it is. Obviously don't make it too light where your screen looks like its batteries have gone, and don't make it dark because obviously you won't be able to see what numbers you're typing in. So going back to this, if I then press the menu, then go to mode setup, it gives me all the different options. Now if you've got the 83GX, you've probably only got 3 options. The A-Level's definitely got a lot more options for you to choose, but generally speaking that should get your calculator behaving how it should. And again, let me just double make sure I've not missed anything off on this particular calculator. There we go, and select option 3, number format. So again, option 3, if you go to, let me just repeat that to go through it, so shift mode setup, that's not behaving, shift mode setup, certainly not liking the shift button, no, come on, no, let's try again. There we go. So here we go to number formats, option 3, and we want to select norm again, and then again option 1, and that should fully reset your calculator to its original form, and then we can then continue with the rest of this video. Now when you decide to buy a calculator, and I certainly would recommend, along with many schools, recommend you to get a Casio calculator. It's always important that you're not just buying the latest model, or you're not buying the most expensive calculator just to impress your classmates. It's important you buy a calculator that's suitable for your level. So the call comes in different ranges, like some calculators can get specialised in primary school and Key Stage 1, Key Stage 2. Some calculators are more suited for Key Stage 3, so years 7 to 9. Some are more suitable for GCSE, and some are more suitable for A-level. Now if you're studying from anything to GCSE, Key Stage 3, year 7s to 11, I definitely would not recommend you buying a graphic calculator, because you think the more complicated, more expensive your calculator is, the more features it's going to be able to do, which is always a positive, but also the more complicated and quite sort of intimidating it can be as well when you don't really know how to use it. It's a bit like having a Bentley, which looks very nice to other people, but driving it might not be the easiest car to drive, although it's pretty comfortable, I must say. So always make sure that the calculator you select is suitable for your level, and you can always ask your maths teacher as to what calculator to recommend, but I would say a Casio calculator will definitely be one to go for. Now most scientific calculators are designed all the way to go up to GCSE level, but if you are in year, let's say 10 or 11, and you're thinking about doing A-level maths, then you might think about investing, and the time has come for you to buy a new calculator. You might want to invest in the FX991EX calculator, which again, I'm not going to quote the price because it probably changed by the time you're watching this video, but again, that's one that's definitely recommended. So on the screen you can see are the 2 popular calculators. Now you might have the model in between, which is again the FX83 GT model, but you can see that just on face value there are buttons that are on both calculators. Now some calculators are going to be more suitable for high level, some are going to be more basic, but the more commonly used buttons are definitely going to appear on both. So the first thing we want to do is just remember that you're not going to need every single button. So it is always important that you kind of not. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to kind of establish which buttons are at A level and which ones are for Key Stage 3. So let's first of all, let's mark the pink as Key Stage 3 and GCSE. and I'm going to mark the yellow ones as A level. So first things first, let's go for the A level one. So the log button, again, A level. So we're not going to touch that log button. Now before we start, you can see that your calculator has got two different functions for each button. So one is the more commonly used function, which is the actual button, and that's labelled on the actual button. And then you've got like a shift function. So if I just show you as an example, so this little symbol that's written in orange or yellow, depending on whatever your eyes are telling you what colour it is. Now to access that particular function, what you need to do is press shift first and then that button. So it's not together, so it's one and after the other, and then you'll get that function or whatever it may be. So for example, here I can see a sign -1. So if I want to access that sign -1, or inverse sign as it's properly named, and if I just load up my calculator, what I press is I'll press shift first, then press sign, and that little whatever's written in yellow tends to come up. So even on the other calculator, on the A-level calculator, so again press shift, and then where is it? Where are we looking? There we are, sign. I can see I've got a sign -1, and you can see that if I do that on both, shift sign -1, it comes up and it displays the exact same. So it's just a change in the font. So first things first, let's go back to what we were talking about. So let's get rid of some of these A-level buttons that you'll never really use at secondary school. So log you probably won't use, ln you won't be using. So let me get rid of that red circle. So ln you won't be using. This differentiation button you won't be using. The stop and end button you probably won't use. The memory function you can use, but again, not really needed. So the recall and end button you're not going to use. I'll show you what the sort of decimal point or degree sign with the speech marks actually means. It's actually a really useful button. The abs button again is more A-level, so you're not really going to use that. And that's pretty much it. And obviously you've got the little yellow features on the times, divide, plus, minus, which again you're not really going to use. And the rand function probably you're not going to use either, but again, something you might want to research or Google, and it'll come up on there. So as you can see, there are very, very similar buttons, and like I said, the location of these may be different. So for example, here I've got an x to the power -1, which appears on the top row, but on this calculator it appears there. So you might find that you've got different locations of certain things. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you what each of these scientific buttons actually do. Obviously I'm hoping that you all understand your plus and the minus and the basic functions of a calculator, but what I'm going to do is show you how to use these functions, how to use it with regards to what questions tend to come up, and we'll go from there. So the first thing we'll look at is negative numbers. Now when we're dealing with negative numbers, we're either going to be adding, multiplying, dividing or subtracting. Now the key thing to notice here is knowing the difference between a minus and a negative number. So when we're subtracting and when we are dealing with negative numbers. Now typically in a test or in a textbook you might find that a negative is represented by a smaller sort of horizontal line, whereas a subtraction is more of a sort of thicker or a bold or longer horizontal line. And sometimes we might get a question where it's actually written in brackets. So for example, if we look at question 1 here, you might find that the brackets emphasizes that the numbers are negative, but we go from here. Now when entering negative numbers on the calculator, the biggest mistake that people make is they use the minus button or the subtraction button, when actually there is a button that is designated for negative numbers, which is this button here. So to enter the calculation of -2 plus -17, what we need to do is press that minus button, then enter 2, then plus, then our negative number button, and then 17. So if I load up this calculator, and here we go. So just reset that. So I'm going to enter -2 plus -17, press equals, and we get -19 as our correct answer. So entering number with question 2, so how we type this into our calculator Now we could use brackets, but there really is no need. So here I'm going to use my negative button, press 5 times minus 8, and again let's put some boxes around these buttons. So when I go onto using my calculator, that's exactly the buttons I'm going to press. So I'm going to be using minus 5 times minus 8, and that should give me an answer of positive 40, which it does. Now the key thing to note is that when you are using quite a sophisticated calculator like majority of the Casio calculators, that your line that you see on your screen should be exactly the same as what the question's written. So here you can see I've got minus 5 times minus 8, and that is exactly what the question's telling me. So for question 3, I'm going to press the negative button, then 3, then a times 5, then I'm going to press plus, and then the minus 6. So whenever you're entering a negative number, you're always pressing this button to signify that it is negative. So again, let's just quickly get the calculator out. So here I'm going to type in minus 3 times positive 5 plus minus 6, and we get the answer of minus 21. Which is not correct, because I must have, oh yeah, minus 21, it is correct, yeah, and there we go. And likewise when we're working with this, and again you could use brackets, but again your calculator is already pre-programmed with BidMass, so let's just get the calculator up to enter us in. Now if I pressed the negative button and the subtraction button, you can see that there is a difference between the two, so always make sure that you are using the button. So minus 4 divided by minus 10, press equals, and we get 2/5 equals 2/5 or 0.4. Now if you haven't got a Casio calculator, you might find that you've got a button on your calculator that looks something like this, but I would say this button that you can see on the screen is something that seems to be more and more often on scientific calculators. But like I said, if you have this button instead, like a plus and a minus, it will do the exact same job and you can enter it in the exact same way. So let's have a look at working with powers. So powers, again, if we just have a quick description of powers, so the little number represents how many of the big number you're multiplying it by. So 2 cubed, or 2 to the power of 3, means 2 times 2 times 2. 8 to the power of 5 means 8 times 8 times 8 times 8 times 8. Now you won't need to ever write these sort of expansions out. So if I had 16 to the power of 17, I'm definitely going to not have to write that all out, but there is buttons in which we can do this on our scientific calculator a lot easily. Now the buttons you need to find are, you've got x squared button and you've got x with a box on top. Now some calculators also have an x cubed button, and you tend to find that functions where appear quite common and quite popular tend to have their own unique button, and ones that are less common tend to be a shift function, and as you can see are written in yellow or orange on your calculator. Now you can see, if I just rub out this green circle, that this calculator does have an x cubed as a shift function, but I'll be honest, you're either going to use either the x squared button or the x square button. Now how we actually enter these calculations in, so here we've got an example of a few questions, and again this is just to practice using your calculator, and obviously you can do this while I'm talking to make sure that you are using it correctly. So let's have a look at entering 43 squared. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to enter 43, and then I'm going to press my x squared button and then press equals. So let's load up that calculator and do exactly that. So I'm going to print 43 and then x squared. So it comes up, as you can see, it's giving me my little 2 then. You can see that my screen on my calculator is exactly how it's written on the question. Press equals and it comes up with 1849, so 1849 or 1849, it's sometimes more commonly known as. So now with 16 cubed, what I'm going to do here now, I could use my shift function. So what I could do is enter 16, then press shift, and then the x squared button, and that should come up with a cube. So let's just double check to make sure that I'm not deceiving myself. So I've got 16, then shift x cubed. And you can see I've now got a little 3. Now, using shift functions can be a little bit more confusing, so what we could do instead is use this x squared button. Now, what this x squared, or this x square button I should say, not x squared because that's a completely different one. So this button here is what we're talking about, so the one with the little box, is that allows us to enter any numerical power in our calculation. So for this, what I could then do is enter 16, then press the x square button, and if I just show you what that then looks like, so for example on the calculator I'm going to press 16, press this x squared button, and now it gives me a box that I can enter any power. Now the power in the question is 3, so I've got, well, that's come up with 6 cubed, so 16 cubed, press equals, and I get the answer of 4096, so 4096. So again, for 2 to the power 6, I'm going to press 2, then press my x with a little square, then enter the power of 6, press equals, and again, let's get the calculator out, so 2 to the power of 6 equals, and that's 64. Now, when we're dealing with negative powers, which is exactly the same, so I'm going to enter my big number as 5, I'm then going to press the x square button, I'm then going to press the negative button, so it's combining because I'm dealing with minus 2, and then press 2 and then press equals. Now if you've done this correctly, you should get an answer of 1 over 25 as a fraction, but we can then convert that into a decimal by, and this is probably a good point to where we introduce a fraction button. Now your calculator, particularly modern scientific Casio calculators I should say, will give your answers as a fraction first. If it will give it in its exact form is what we really say. So when you enter a calculation, it may come up as a fraction, it may even come up as a square root, which we'll move on to later. But if you want the decimal version, then the button you need to press is this SD button. Now sometimes it may be classed as an FD button, as a fractions to decimals, but in terms of this, the SD button is what you then need to press. So if I then enter this calculation in, so let me get the calculator up again. So I'm going to press 5, x, the little box, I'm going to enter minus 2, so you can see that the power is written as a power in the calculator. This is why these calculators are really good. Press equals, comes up as 1 over 25, but I press SD, it comes up with the decimal equivalent of 0.04. And then finally for question 5, all I now need to do is combine all of those things together. So again, I'm just going to go straight into using the calculator, so I've got 5 squared. Now you could always just go on from there, so I've got a plus. Now that should be fine. I'm trying to just make sure that it's not. Now what you might find is that if your plus seems like this, for example, you can see that I've got a small plus, which is not what I'm wanting, because I don't want the plus as a power, I want it on the side. So what you might have to do is scroll across and then type in your plus, and then 3 to the power of 4, and then scroll across, minus 2 to the power of 6. So again, always make sure that the question, how you're working out on your screen of your calculator, is exactly how the question's written on your textbook or exam paper, and I press equals and I get the answer of 42. So let's move on to the next area, which is looking at square roots, cube roots and roots in general. Now for this, these are the buttons that we've kind of been working with. So we want to be finding this button here, which basically looks like a square root with a box, and above that, as you can see in yellow, we've got our cube root button. Now the box, the empty box, basically means is what the number that you're actually going to write in. Now I'm not going to put that in a box because it's not in a box. And we're also going to find this second function here, which basically looks like a little box with a square root with a box inside the square root. Now these are the 3 functions that we're going to use. Now this here and this one here on the calculator are shift functions. So in order to access those options, what I need to do is press shift first and then the button that is below the bit that I need. So to enter the square root of 26, so let's get the calculator open and let's enter these questions in. So again, I'm going to open my calculator, I'm going to type in the square root of 26, press equals, press the SD button, and it comes up with 5.099, and there's a few other numbers which I've now forgotten what they are. Now for cube root, now the biggest mistake that people do is when they see a cube root of 64, they think, oh, let's stick a 3 and then press the square root button. Now there is a massive difference between 3 square root of 64 and the cube root of 64. Now if you want the cube root, what you need to do is press shift and then the square root button. You can see we've got a 3 that comes up, so it automatically puts in. So the only thing I've got to do is put the number inside the root in the calculator. I do cube root 64 and it comes out with an answer of 4. So the answer to that one is 4. Now when you've got a root that is not a square root or not a 3, here we've got a 5, so what I need to do is I need to select this second function here. So this button is what I'm looking for. Now to access that, let's get the calculator up again. So if I press shift and the X with the square button, you can see I've got 2 empty boxes and all I've got to do is fill in the numbers on the calculator. So here I've got a 5 and the number that goes inside is 585. I press equals and it gives me an answer of 3.576. So 3.576, and there's a few numbers that do follow. Now combining all of that together, let's have a look at question 4. So again, you can do this with me. So here we're going to press the square root button and write 98. I'm then going to scroll across. Now be careful when you are dealing with calculations with more than one square root or roots and numbers, make sure that the square root stops where the number stops. So for example, if I just start again, if I do square root of 98 and then write plus, you can see how the square root is still continuing, and that's not what I'm wanting. So if I just quickly delete all of that, now once I've stopped at 98, if I scroll across plus, and you can see now the square root has terminated. So now I can enter the next one, which is the cube root of 125, and again scroll across, then minus, and then I'm going to press shift and that, and then enter the missing number. So I've got 4 outside and 80 inside. Press equals, and you can see the display on the calculator is exactly how it's written in the question. The square roots are all terminated and it's all fine like so. So press equals and it gives me an answer of 11908. So equals 11908, and there's a few other numbers that do follow. Now typically in these types of questions you might get it's usually incorporated with rounding, and again if you're not too sure about rounding, I have made a video, so it might be worth looking at that if you're not too sure what that is. So let's have a look at the next one. So let's have a look at entering fractions, simplifying fractions and mixed numbers. So fractions are a very favourite topic of maths for most students. That is a complete utter lie, being sarcastic, but let's have a look at how we can use our calculator to do fraction work for us. Now a simple question is, how do we simplify fractions? Now the button in question that we're going to be working with, and this is a really good function of a Casio calculator, is this button here. Now this is our fraction button. Like I said, what modern calculator are trying to do is make it basically what you're typing in on your calculator is exactly how a question is displayed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press this fraction button first. So let's get the calculator out. So to enter fractions, I press the fraction button, and as you can see, the only thing I've got to do is enter the numerator and the denominator. So if I press 15 and then scroll across, so go down, then enter 70. Now if I press equals, now if this fraction can simplify, which this one clearly can, if I press equals, it will automatically simplify the fraction for me. So here what I've got here is 3 and 14, and there we go. Now if you have an improper fraction, so again improper fractions are where the numerator is bigger than the denominator, and what we'll do is write this as a mixed number. Now here these calculators can easily do this. So if I enter the fraction as it is, so I've got 27 over 12, and I press equals, as you can see all it does is it simplifies the fraction for me. So this is going to be 9 over 4, and let's say I want to convert that into a mixed number. Now what you can do is if you press shift and the SD button, you can see that it converts it into a mixed number already for me. And likewise, if I wanted to do the opposite, I just press shift and the SD button and it returns back to an improper fraction. So it's a really good feature that you may want to use. Now when entering mixed numbers, now one thing you don't want to do is, as you can see, you've got a big number and a fraction. One of the big errors that people make is they enter the big number, then press the fraction button, or, which doesn't really help, so what they then do is they enter the fraction, so 2/3, and then they scroll across and stick a 4 there. Now that is not the same as 4 2/3. So what we need to do, now there is a function. Now if you look at the shift function, which is just above the fraction button, you can see you've got 3 little boxes. And I press shift and that fraction button, you can see now it gives me the sort of template of entering a mixed number. So here I can enter 4, scroll across 2, scroll across again, enter 3, and there you can see I've perfectly entered my mixed number. And then if I scroll across, I can then add or subtract or do whatever I want from that. So just make sure you scroll across, and if I press equals, it will automatically convert this mixed number into an improper fraction. And likewise, if I want to convert it back, I just press the SD button, and again, I'm not doing any calculation, I'm just entering it on my calculator. Now let's have a look at how we do fractional calculation. So here let's have a look at question 1. So I want to do 12/13 minus 5/8. So again, open my fraction button, 12/13, scroll across to enter the minus, and then press the fraction button again, 5/8, press equals, and there you can see it automatically gives me my fraction already done. If I wanted it as a decimal, just press the SD button and it will convert it for me. So this is like a fraction to decimals, or surds, which is like square roots to decimals, which is what that button actually does. Now for question 2, I've got a mixed number, so I'm going to press shift and the fraction button, so I can now enter the numbers in. So I've got 12 and 7/8, scroll across, divided by, and then I've got another mixed number, so shift, fraction button, 3 and 3/5, press equals, and it gives me the answer of 515/144. Now as you can see, that's an improper fraction, so if I wanted to convert it into a mixed number, press shift and the SD button, and it automatically gives the answer as a mixed number. Now let's combine everything we've done with question 3. So again, I'm going to set up my fraction. Now here what I'm going to do is enter the numerator exactly on the top half of this fraction. So I've got 7 plus the square root of 250. I'm then going to scroll across or down till it gets to the bottom boxes highlighted. I'm going to do 35 minus, then I've got 3, and then to the power of 3. So you can see there that what's on the screen, exactly the same format, perfectly exact copied from the question. Press equals, and it gives me an answer that's giving me a square root, but I don't really like how that's written. So press the SD button, and the correct answer of 2.851423538 is done. So let's have a look at the next thing we can do on our calculator. So here, fractions to decimals, decimals to fractions. And like I said, this calculator is really sophisticated, and what this topic usually involves is this SD button. So here, let's have a look. So I'm going to convert fractions into decimals. So all I need to do is load the calculator up. So again, press the fraction, enter the fraction you want converting, so 3/4. Once it's done, press equals, doesn't do anything, but if I press the SD button, it will automatically convert it into a decimal for me. Now if I did the mixed number, so shift, and then enter the components 6, 7, and 8, equals, again it converts it to an improper fraction, but press the SD button, converts it into a decimal, press shift and SD, converts it back to a mixed number. And likewise, if I just do the last one for number 2, so I've got 12/23, press equals, doesn't do much, but if I press the SD button, it will automatically convert it into a decimal for me. Now if you're working the opposite way, so here we've got 0.24, press equals, and you can see just simply it automatically converts it into a fraction for me. So if I type in 5.245, press equals, again automatically converts it into a fraction, or in this case an improper fraction. Press shift and the SD button, and it will convert it for me into a mixed number. So any number that's bigger than 1 can be written as a decimal number, can be written as a mixed number. And likewise 0.2, press equals, automatic gives me as a fraction. Now with reoccurring decimals into fractions, or entering reoccurring decimals onto your calculator, now unfortunately the newer calculators don't seem to have this option. Now if you've got one of the older Casio calculators, you might find a button or a shift function that looks something like this. So if you're entering, let's say 0.2 recurring, and you wanted to enter this on your calculator and you've got this function, then what you would do is you would enter 0. Then press that button, either it be a shift function or as a separate function, then enter 2 inside the box, and then press equals, and it will then come up with the correct answer of 2/9. Now, like I said, unfortunately the newer calculators don't seem to have this function, but if you have got one of the older calculators, then one thing you could do is to enter the decimal, so 0.2 recurring, and then just go a little bit mental with the 2's, press equals, and this one doesn't. Let's go for a little bit more. It was working earlier, and you can see that it automatically converts it to 2/9. You might need to go a little bit crazy with the recurring numbers, but eventually it should give you the fraction. So here if we're entering 0.15 recurring, so what this number is, this number here is 0.1515151515, and that continues. So entering this on the calculator, what I would do is just enter 0.1515151515, go a little bit crazy, press equals, and again it gives me the decimal, the fraction of 5/33. And likewise, if I was entering this, so you can see that only the 6 is reoccurring, so I've got 2.35, then enter loads of 6's, press equals, and it gives me the fraction of 707/300. Press shift and the SD button, and it automatically converts it for me into a mixed number. So let's have a look at the next thing we can then look at. Now, entering pi for circle topics. Now again, pi is a circle topic. If you're not sure about what pi is, there is a video tutorial on area and circumference of a circle where pi is introduced. Now pi is sometimes on some calculators is a separate button, but in most cases on the Casio calculator it tends to be a shift function, and where you can find pi is usually on the bottom row in the middle button, and it's a shift function. So to access pi, all I need to do is press shift and then press the times 10 to the power of x button. So to enter 2 pi, let me just load the calculator up so I'll get the new one this time. And so to enter, I'm going to press 2 and then press shift pi, press equals, and it comes up to 2 pi. And if I want the decimal equivalent, press the SD button, job done. So 16 pi would be 16. I could times that, we don't have to. Shift and then pi, so pi symbol comes up, press equals, comes up with 16 pi, SD converts it to its decimal. For 12 squared, I'm going to 12, then squared, scroll across, times pi, so shift and then the pi button, press equals, press SD, and you've got your decimal equivalent. So again, pi function is a sort of second function feature on your calculator, so make sure you're aware of it. Some calculators, non-Casio, may have pi as a separate button. If it was me designing a calculator, I would definitely have it as a separate button, because obviously circles is a very, very popular question when you move on to year 9 onwards. So let's have a look at the next one, entering percentages on your calculator. So let's say I want to work out 13% of 540. Now there is a method using decimal multipliers, which is a feature on another video. I'm going to keep saying that a lot with the more videos I make, but let's see how we can do this. Now on your calculator, if you search enough, you will find a percentage symbol that is classed as a second function feature. So to enter 13%, now of in maths means times, so to do this, what I'm going to enter is 13, then press shift, then press the Ans button, and the percentage symbol should come up, then times 540. So let's get the calculator up and work this out. So here I'm going to do 13%, so shift and then the percentage symbol times 540, press equals, and it gives me the answer of 70.2. So the answer there would be £70.20. And likewise, if we had a decimal percentage, so again exactly the same, 34.7, shift percent times 1982, press equals, comes up with 687. So 687, and remembering what the last 3 digits were, 754, 754, and also we work with money, so I can cancel that 4, so it's just 687 and 75 pence. And there we go. Which kind of leads us on to the last bit we're going to look at in this is, or not the last bit, we've got 2 more things to look at. Now, writing numbers as a product of their primes. Now, if you have absolutely no idea what I'm talking about, again, there is another video which is kind of linked with lowest common multiples and highest common factors. But what we're going to do here is we're going to convert each of these numbers as a product of their primes. So to do this, now what you're looking for is the word fact, and that is just here. So to convert these numbers into products of their primes, if you enter the number in, so I'm going to enter 270 rather, press equals, and then press shift and to access the fact, you can see that it converts it into a product for its primes, so it would be 2 times 3 cubed times 5, and there is the conversion done for me. So enter 450 again. All I need to do here is on the calculator, let's use this one here, which doesn't have the feature, because you can see it doesn't say fact, so it's not available on that particular calculator. But if you have got that fact feature, so I've got 450, press equals, then press shift and fact, and it's converted it for me, so it's 235, so 2 times 3 squared times 5 squared gives me that answer. And then 825 again, so I'm going to press enter the number in, so 825, press equals, then press shift and then the fact button, and it comes up with 3, 5, 11, so 3 times 5 squared times 11, job done. And then finally, moving on to the last feature, which is using the Ans button. Now the Ans button, basically what that does, it remembers your last answer. Now this is incredibly useful when you're dealing with decimal numbers or higher level mathematics, that sometimes you want to make sure you're using the exact form of a previous answer. Now if your number is, let's say, like 10 decimal places, you don't want to be writing it down and, or a worst case scenario, remembering those digits, so you want to use your Ans feature. Now when we're dealing with increase and decrease percentages, one method of doing this is to work out what 34% of 450 is, and then all we then need to do is then add the answer to 450. So let's have a look at working this out. So let's get the calculator out. I'm going to use the Ans function. So again, 34%, so shift percent times 450, so press equals, and it's giving me 153. Now let's say that was a really nasty decimal number, and so I want to add 153 to 450. Now rather than entering 153, what I'm going to do is press the Ans function plus 450, press equals, and it automatically remembers the previous answer. So the answer then would be 603. So the Ans button basically tells you how to work out, and it automatically stores the previous answer on your calculator. Now other useful things on your calculator, that's in another video, is standard form. So standard form is another way of writing large or small numbers, and your standard form button is this here, which again is in another video. And this button here, which is like a degree sign with an apostrophe and some speech marks, that basically is to deal with time. Now there is a separate video I've made on how to work out time on your calculator, which I strongly recommend, and it will explain how to use that button correctly when dealing with time questions. Now as I said, your calculator is designed for multiple levels of mathematics. Some you will need to know, some depending on what level of mathematics you're dealing with you need to know, and some goes way beyond what you're going to be expected to know. So don't think that you're expected to know what every single feature on your calculator is, but I would certainly say that what we've gone through in this video covers a lot of the basics up to GCSE level at the very least. Now the sine, cos and tan buttons, that again is in another video, and that's related to trigonometry. So if you're not too sure and you want to take your mathematics a little bit further, then obviously you can look up videos on trigonometry, which is also available on my channel.